Well, welcome to another edition of Behind the Taps. My name is Andrew Coppolino, and I want to introduce you to a friend of mine and also one of the premier chefs and restaurateurs in Waterloo region. It's Nick Benninger, and we're here at Taco Farm, one of his locations. It's on Herb Street, just about at King in Uptown Waterloo. And in amongst all of the construction, we're having a few pints. Going to talk a little bit about beer. Nick, thanks for coming on and spending a little time with us. I know it's a popular drink, obviously, and it's also a favorite that you have. You got the old sort of beard that goes with the craft beer scene. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your personal relationship, I guess, if we can call it that, is with beer.
I've always loved beer. I love all libations, really, but beer in particular speaks to me on a lot of levels. For one, there's a huge history in the region with craft beer, and for two, it's just so approachable, right? Sometimes when we get talking about wine and pairing wine with food, you lose a lot of the crowd because they immediately rule it out as a sort of highbrow, pretentious thing, which it's not. But beer doesn't sort of create those same barriers, so we can get into talking to someone about different styles of beer and beer pairings with food, or even cooking with beer, where they might not have that conversation with wine. So I've really enjoyed the process of going through beer with people and talking about just the way it compare with foods. And there's so much differences from strain to strain or type of beer that a lot of people don't think about it until they get into it. And it's just such an awesome world to sort of explore. So.
Well, you've been in the region cooking for a very long time. You've been an owner of a couple restaurants now for, I guess, around 6-7 years. How have you seen that evolve? So how have you seen the beer scene change and sort of the information and what people are willing to try? How has that developed and evolved?
Well, it's been huge. I mean, you can just look at the menus around town, first of all, to see how many craft beers are on there versus the big brands. Even in what people might not consider like, hip or trendy restaurants. So even the normal restaurants are putting up different styles of beers. When we first opened, to get beers that weren't Molson or Sleeman or any of the big guys on tap was a challenge to find them. And about year 2 or 3, so let's say 2010, it really started to change, and every single day there was someone else knocking on our door with a new craft beer. And it's still continuing today, and most of them are really awesome. There's a few that maybe should practice a little longer, and that's the nature of the explosion, I think, when you have so much of the scene grow. But there's so much cool stuff out there. So you're seeing different styles, and even within those styles, just modifications, whether they're barrel aging it or infusing it with coffee or whatever. It's changed big time. And then as far as the customers' willingness to try new stuff, we've seen that change a lot too. When we first started get it into the craft beers, we had Bo's Lug Tread on, and that was our sort of gateway for people to, they didn't want to try a different beer. They were afraid of what craft beer meant. So like, try this beer, very basic, simple style. And no one ever disliked that beer, so it was an introduction to the scene. And once you had their trust, then you could sort of get them to try some different styles and some of the beefier IPAs or whatever. So it's changed a great deal. And now here at Taco Farm, for instance, our biggest sellers are the craft beers. We still move a lot of like what we'll say ordinary beers, but they're made by small breweries. But then you get into the interesting beers, the higher alcohol percentages, they fly off the shelves. So there's an appetite for it, and it's a lot of fun to be part of.
Well, let's move from the restaurant scene to the home cook, and maybe just some sort of professional tips or guidelines, principles, touchstones to think about when people might want to try cooking with beer, using beer in a menu, using beer in a recipe that they're making at home.
Yeah, well, I think it's a lot like cooking with anything, really. You want to put a little thought into the flavors you're going for. So there's obviously beers that are much more mild, like an American-style Pilsner or lagers that aren't going to lend a whole lot to beer, but they will give some notes. And then you get into these beers like you have an American Pale Ale, and I have the India Pale Ale. These are just full of hoppy bitterness, and there's a sweetness to it. So these types of beers are going to lend a heck of a lot more to the dish. And just like cooking with wine, if you taste it now, it's just going to concentrate down and taste even stronger as you cook and reduce it. So you just want to be aware of that. And you know what? We eat our mistakes and we drink them too. So just
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So just get out there and have a little fun. I recommend just starting out with little bits here and there, and as you grow more comfortable with it, just expand it. But I would say beer, unlike wine, is a little more subtle when cooking with it, especially with the lighter sort of styles. So don't be afraid to get in there and give it a go. And like I said, the worst case scenario is you eat a less than perfect meal, but most meals at home are less than perfect, and that's why people come see us.
Okay, so you're going to cook something for us. Tell us a little bit about the dish you'll prepare and how beer fits into it and how you've chosen the particular beer to go in with those particular other ingredients.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to cook with this IPA that I have here. We're going to do a little bit of a seafood sort of boil or steamed up seafood in the beer. So we're going to grill off some calamari, some shrimp, steam some mussels. I'm going to throw some chorizo in there. And then, like I said, I'm going to throw some of this IPA in there. The reason I'm going with the IPA is because in my chorizo, I've got lots of garlic, lots of cumin, and a bunch of different chilies. Some rosemary. Rosemary and for me, rosemary and hops are like coffee and cream. They go together real well. So it'll be a real natural pairing. If I went with a lighter beer, we just wouldn't know it was there, and that would be fine. It's not to say it would taste bad, it would just disappear, and then why bother? So we'll start with this IPA, which has a real bright, it's got citrus notes, it's got sort of herbaceous bitterness, and I think it'll build really well into our seafood dish. So.
And I'll assume there'll be no mistakes.
Well, who knows? I got this beautiful calamari, just a little oil, salt and pepper on it, and then some of our fresh herbs. I'm doing this all on the grill so that I can just picture myself in my backyard pulling this all off with a bottle of beer next to me and no one paying attention to how much goes in the pan. Like I said, those herbaceous notes, the bitterness of the charcoal, the grill kind of thing is going to lend itself really well to that IPA flavor. Something that I'm looking to sort of enhance this time. Pretty well thought out dish, I think. Pairs really well with beer. Taste of beer, all the perfect things.